Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl were some of the most anticipated Pokemon games since, well, the last remakes we had in 2014. Now that they've been out for a little bit, I'm going to run through these new takes on Sinnoh and express the thoughts from a perspective of a hardcore Pokemon veteran. Reminder that these are all my subjective opinions that may or may not match up to yours, and that is okay. I'm going to start by stating the absolute obvious. These games are nearly identical to the originals they're modeled after. That of course comes with some good things and with some bad things. Obviously, the original Sinnoh games were pretty darn amazing, if you oversee some glaring issues, but where BDSP really hurts is how, despite those issues being highlighted, talked about, cried upon, and even fixed in their third version 12 years before, they were still included to preserve their faithful title. This is where BDSP suffers the most. Things like Sinnoh introduced evolutions being locked to the post-game or sometimes even beyond, single-use TMs, and of course the overwhelming lack of Platinum content. People wanted a Platinum remake for more than just the Distortion world, you know? And I'll give credit where credit is due that they also removed some of these issues like Sinnoh's treacherous requirement for HMs and the dreadfully slow processing. All of that is fine and dandy with me really. I'm personally okay with the faithful remake, as me being the consumer that I am will buy every copy anyways, but my problem lies when the game actually functions worse in some aspects compared to a game released for half the price on a handheld console 15 years before. My biggest issue and turnoff for BDSP is not nearly talked about enough. In fact, I almost never hear anybody talk about it at all. I'm going to go really into it here, so be ready. This, of course, is the movement. There are two things that make up most of a Pokemon game: battling and moving around. And if one of those things is just outright dysfunctional, you're not going to have a good time. I'm no game designer, so I may be wrong, but I believe the biggest source of the issue derives from the player character's hitbox being way too large, thus resulting in terrible collision detection. People will commonly blame this as because the game is free motion while being built on a grid, but that's just incorrect. X and Y and ORAS were also built on a grid, for the most part, and work perfectly fine with both free run and tile-paced movements. Things like squeezing into a one-tile wide pathway is incredibly fluid in the Gen 6 games, but in BDSP you have to perfectly center yourself in the tile to go in. Otherwise, you'll be doing this kind of stupid movement. This makes traversing paths with a lot of tight turns and deviations an absolute nightmare. That's okay, because the D-pad exists to walk exclusively on the grid, and as a veteran Pokemon trainer, that's how I prefer to play anyways. Oh my gosh, even the D-pad is broken. I also dislike the fact that your character doesn't stay in the direct center of the screen if you run around long enough, and he will eventually drift towards the bottom of the screen, making it really difficult to see what's below you, which is incredibly prevalent in the Sinnoh Grand Underground. They even somehow butchered the bike? When you start to move, there's this startup speed animation part that shouldn't even really exist, and because of this, it makes stop and go riding really annoying. Also, a quick shift in direction on the bike will also cause a complete stop, which never existed before. It's worth pointing out as well that in Generation 6, if you ever get into a tight space like this, the camera will shift to a more overhead view, making tight navigations a lot easier. BDSP, of course, does not do this, and makes things like this a lot clunkier. And lastly, on the topic of movement is when you have anything following you, whether it's a stat trainer or your partner Pokemon, swapping places with them is a real nightmare and shouldn't even be a problem, especially since it wasn't in the originals. Speaking of Pokemon following you, why don't they? I get that them not snapping exactly onto your movements might give them a little more free range to show some character in these Pokemon, but I prefer a full mimic instead of these slower ones being left behind and respawning behind me over and over again. There are some really cool and cute animations for following Pokemon though, like Regigigas, walking super slow in reference to its slow start ability. Seedot, hopping around on its two tiny little feet. And Golem, withdrawing and rolling around in its hedgehog mode. There are also some just awful excuses, like Milotic or Ekans. I actually cannot believe that this isn't the final product of the game. The worst part about Pokemon following you is the one that's talked about the most. How they made these gigantic, Titan-sized Pokemon as small as the chibi character. Even in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, they were still chibi and sized appropriately. There are some really cool concepts online on how you can use the Pokemon Rumble models and how they look really well, and honestly, I love its art style and feel it works properly, but we both know that will never happen. I want to throw out there too, this new trend that Pokemon started with Let's Go, and I hope to Arceus that they don't establish it as the future of the franchise. This of course is the limited national Pokedex. I won't go into it too much because it's really not strictly a BDSP problem, however the game does suffer from it. Perhaps I'll make a video going into that later, but I do want to get it out there that this is a terrible decision for the plentitude of reasons. There are a couple of UI changes I would tweak. For instance, the Poketch is a little clunky in my opinion. The Poketch was modeled in 2007 after what smartwatches were at the time. Since then, however, technology has advanced, and this retroactively makes the Poketch look really, really ancient. Instead, they could have created a whole new UI, with a Poketch home screen or something, similar to the Nook phone from Animal Crossing. A good example of this is the Pokegear from Gold and Silver, and its newer, cleaner version in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Sure, it functions the same, but it's a lot more usable and clean. The lack of a second screen really does hurt this, but the least they could have done was give us the Platinum version, with the back button. Why the heck did they stay that faithful to Diamond and Pearl? It's a little more usable on handheld, but when it's docked, it honestly becomes really useless. Another UI change I'd personally make would be to remove the town map option from the pause menu and make this the Explorer kit. Look, the plus button already opens up the map, and I'm certain 99% of the player base uses that anyways. Having the Explorer kit on your pause menu seems a little more fitting to me because not only is this a heavily pushed and advertised feature in these games, but it prevents the need from adding it to the register menu instead of doubling up on the same thing. My last main UI change would be in reference to the entire absence of the battle info screen, where in Sun and Moon and Sword and Shield, you could view a detailed snippet of what is currently happening in the match, like stat persuasions, barriers, weather, and other things. Why is this gone? This is probably the only good thing to come out of Gen 7, and Masuda has already gone Old Yeller mode on it. Oh yeah, I'm going to be the guy who says it. Sure, I'm being nitpicky, but the Pokemon they choose for the HMs are just a little weird. Okay, I get it, Bibarel is a meme Pokemon, and that's fine for one, but the fact that 5 out of 8 of the HM animations are from the Bidoof family seems kind of like a cop-out. We could be surfing on a Lumineon, rock smashing with a Krogunk, cutting with a Skorupi, but no, Bidoof. Let's also talk a little bit about TMs. They messed this up even more than returning them back to single use, which is terrible by the way. Dealing with single use TMs for 15 years and then blessing us with the permanent usage of them for another 10 years just to revert it back has to be the biggest tease in history. But beyond these TMs being single use, they're also spaced out terribly. In the original Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, there are many great TMs accessible throughout the story. Brick Break with only 2 badges, Flamethrower and Thunderbolt accessible just after your 5th badge, Shadow Ball just not far after, Psychic and Ice Beam right when you get Rock Climb, but in BDSP? Good TMs like this are purchasable at the Veilstone department store due to the removal of the Game Corner. My Gardevoir knew Psychic and Dazzling Gleam with literally just 2 badges, and I think that not only ruins the balance of the game, but completely destroys the value of returning to locations like Fuego Ironworks or Valley Windworks. I think the solution is to allow these to be purchased infinitely once you're champion, because I'm definitely not complaining about having as many of them as I want, It's just kinda sad how early you can do that. A weird problem that many people may not have even noticed, but my experienced hands and eyes hate, is BDSP's PC system. You done messed up, BB. Navigating the PC feels incredibly clunky now, with small input lags on mini menus and moving around. Look how natural the PC moves around in X and Y versus BDSP. Of course, the footage isn't really going to convey it as well as handling it yourself, but you get what I'm saying here. I end up making a lot of misclicks because my hands and mind work faster than this Windows 95 version of the storage system. Not only is it clunky though, it auto-sorts newly caught Pokemon into a box order instead of the current box selected, like the previous 18 years have done. Here's an example. In box 1, I have 29 out of 30 Pokemon with 1 empty space, and switch to box 2. From this point, I leave the PC and go catch another Pokemon. In previous games, this caught Pokemon will be sent to box 2 as it is the most recently used box. But now, however, it goes to the first empty space, which is in box 1. This makes losing Pokemon really easy and almost necessary to simply keep your first box always entirely empty, just so it acts as a safety net. Another nitpicky point here, but I'm really sad to see that none of the characters got a refreshed design, a staple of the remakes this far. Gym leaders, rivals, and player characters have all been hit by modernization and appearances until this point. In BDSP, however, everyone looks exactly the same, and some characters even stand out as being obviously designed from the Gen 4 era, like Myra, for instance. There's also no one new added to the game, with the exception of a few NPCs that don't really do anything, unlike Oras with Aurun, Licia, and Zinnia. The characters are exactly the same, and they even left out my boy Looker. Okay, I'll finish off my negatives here with a strong and frequently voiced one. The mandatory EXP share and affection system. These are broken. Absolutely, positively, without a doubt, broken. It boggles my mind that functions like this are being defended by some people. Mini rant incoming. Over 25 years of Pokemon games, spanning 8 mainline regions, literal generations of people and more, Pokemon has always had one theme across them: bonding. The bond between trainer and Pokemon is enough to overcome anything. If my bonds get stronger and stronger the more time I spend with my Pokemon, then why is it that I missed the entire curliest stage of my Gardevoir? I mean, I practically never saw the thing because I was too busy training something else. Forcing this makes the game on easy mode, and I'm sure everyone can agree on that. But not only that, it feels like I don't get the chance to be with my Pokemon, and after all, isn't that the point of all this? Fellow veterans out there may remember a time when your team was just a single overleveled Blaziken and a bunch of fodder swaps, and then we got our butt whooped whenever we fought something that we poorly matched against. These kinds of experiences didn't make us stop playing. It made us create a new team and have more Pokemon with us, and together we overcame the threats. Mandatory EXP share not only removes the bond we made, but also provides a cheesy cop-out by a Pokemon practically self-training itself in the background. At least provide the option to turn this off, because enemy teams aren't really even properly scaled to be a threat or a match. And while I hate forced EXP, the bond is the exact same reason why I like affection. I don't think it should be as broken as it is, but I definitely like the concept. Perhaps removing the increased crit chance or not allowing the ability to hang on multiple times in a row would be a good place to start. Either way, I think it's an okay concept, it just needs a little tweaking. I will also admit that they did buff some boss battles pretty greatly in these games, which is something it desperately needed. JPR actually made an excellent video diving in depths into the teams of the Gym Leaders and Elite Four, and shows us what changed for better in most cases. I recommend giving that video a watch after you finish this one. Something to mention too is the incredible soundtrack this game has to offer. Sinnoh has probably the best music for the majority of the series, but man, did they really not let us down with this remastered music. They hit notes properly and impactfully as they should, and like the obvious lake theme, but also songs like Orberg and the Nighttime Pokemon Center hit just right in respects to the originals. The only funky one I'd say is the Galactic Battle, but even then, that track is great. Okay, this one might be a hot take, but I'm actually a big fan of the chibi art style. Unfortunately, I don't think it was quite of an artistic way of approaching this, as much as it was due to the awfully limiting faithful status thing that they were going for. I think Gen 6 and Let's Go had the art style down pat, but I will take BDSP's chibi models over the lanky dummies Gen 7 and 8 had any day. I think the scene on Spear Pillar was pretty cool even in chibi, but I can understand how people don't care for it. It's not perfect, but I still like it. I also think it's pretty safe opinion to say that the overworld's graphics are pretty darn good. The lighting, the shining, the water, and characters all look pretty darn good looking around. There are a few moments where I stopped and appreciated the graphics of the game. The battle scene I won't say too much about because it really doesn't even look half as good, but whatever. My personal favorite spot is Mount Coronet's peak and the blizzard above. This one might be setting the bar low, but another thing I'm grateful for in this game is that the models load super quick in the pause menu, and that they are displayed on a blue textured background in comparison to Sword and Shield, where the models took a little time to load and were displayed on a white background, sometimes making it really hard to see the Pokemon itself. Call me crazy, but I think that the Pokemon I have should be visible. Just saying. These games also include a few tiny, classic Game Freak quirks that remind me of the time when they actually cared. For instance, on the topic of models, the Pokedex models are mimicking the stances of the sprites from the originals. Subtle, but cute. You can also not only check their footprint, a feature that hasn't been seen since Black and White, but pressing the plus button also allows you to see the Pokemon's footprints as if they were on all of their feet, and I think this feature is incredibly adorable and shows great attention to detail. Even further than that though, the Pokedex has the ability to weight check Pokemon in a very funny way, with different ridiculous animations depending on the weight class of the Pokemon being checked. Something that was changed in both positive and negative ways was the Sinnoh Grand Underground. While mining remains nearly identical to the originals, they did add in Pokemon hideaways, which can be the solution to the problem of missing fire types and the infernal process of catching Munchlax. But I'm just simply not a fan of overworld spawns. It makes videos a nightmare to make, but also, I just simply think random encounters are better. At least they're contained to the depths of Sinnoh dungeons though, so I'll consider this a pro for sheer availability of Pokemon here. In fact, I think the availability is a little too good and it kind of ruins the whole purpose and importance of swarms and Pokeradar, but whatever. The real bummer for the Underground are the secret bases. In the originals, for those of you unaware, secret bases were much more than just a simple trophy collection. They were a space for you to fully decorate with a huge variety of items, and you could place flags for your friends to capture. It was a much more interactive hub than it is now, a real downgrade if you ask me, but alas, it is modern Pokemon. Hey, at least there's online. My final point in this video essay is of course the changes made to the Pokemon Super Contest Hall. In my personal opinion, contests function much better in BDSP than they did in the originals. It still takes a little getting used to, but I believe functionally they are quicker and easier to grasp here, as well as simply just more entertaining. I think stage leveling is a small but new feature that's really cute, as well as seeing Fantina, Joanna, and Jasmine's new bangin' outfit in 3D. I mean seriously, look at this queen over here. Overall, I'd say these games are pretty darn good, but I'm not sure how much credit I should give to BDSP over the originals. Out of new features and functions in this game, I'd say that it's nearly a solid 50-50 when it comes to good and bad, with the worst being the mandatory EXP and movements, and the best being modern Pokemon quality of life changes and typing updates. I'm not a hater of Faithful Remix, but when they blatantly choose the worst option of the two in order to claim that title, it just simply comes off as lazy and poor game design. I'm a fan of BDSP, and it's probably the closest we'll get to an actual Pokemon game for a long time. I will obviously recommend this game to anyone new to the franchise. I'd give the game a solid 7 out of 10. Could be better, but it could be much, much worse.